Hello, my Bill 5000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with another Coffeehouse Crime. This one is titled The Horrors Found in Room 309, The Murder of Stephany Flores Ramirez? The Murder of Stephany Flores Ramirez. Let's go ahead and get today's story. Go ahead, turn them lights down low, put on something comfy, couple, something special. Let's get horrified. Horrors is in the title. We're going with horrified.
As the daughter of a powerful Peruvian man, Stephany Ramirez was an academic star with a wild streak to her personality. Being wealthy and a business student, she also liked to play poker. And it was during one of those nights out playing poker that she met a tall and charming foreign man. But what she didn't know was that this man was a murderer currently on the run from a notorious North American case. And although she would eventually realize this herself, it was only once she was behind closed doors with him. And tragically, it was all too late, because now she was alone in a room with Joran Van Der Sloot. Today, we're looking at the lesser told half of Van Der Sloot's story, and how Stephany's life was ended by a cruel and cold-hearted killer who was already internationally suspected to be a murderer.
It's about time that people get to see the other side of the story.
Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're looking at the connected case of Stephany Flores Ramirez. By now, many of you will know about the case of Natalee Holloway, but did you know that on the 5th-year anniversary of her death, her killer murdered another innocent woman? This video is dedicated to the lesser-heard voice of Stephany, and today we're highlighting how her death was entirely avoidable. By the way, if you're new here, Coffeehouse Crime is all about true crime, strange and chilling stories, and the best way to support me is by subscribing to the channel. So, if you're a fan of caffeine,
Yep. Go over, support the man, show him some love, and while you're at it, go ahead and support me too. Click that subscribe button. Become part of the Bill 5000 Nation. We do some crazy shit here, bruh.
and investigation, then please hit that subscribe button now. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat, and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Stephany Flores Ramirez.
You know, the best way to get comfy and sit back and relax is in some comfy Bill 5000 merch. Link is in the description.
Welcome to the country of Peru, folks. Found on the western coast of South America, Peru shares its border with 5 other nations. Home to the potato and more than 70% of the world's alpaca population, Peru's forests also have the greatest biological diversity on the planet.
You had me at potato, bro. Fucking love taters. Taters is like one of my most favoriteest things in the world.
You've got the likes of jaguars, ocelots, kinkajou, bush dogs, and the Andean condor,
Is a kinkajou like a Pikachu?
all under one luscious roof. And of course, I can't forget about the capybara, because everyone loves a capybara. Today, we're traveling to Peru's capital, Lima.
They're like giant fucking guinea pigs, bro. You gotta fucking love them, homie.
Situated on the western coast, it is the second largest city in the world to be built in a desert, after Cairo, of course. And with a population of more than 11 million residents, it's the country's economic powerhouse. Nicknamed as the City of Kings, Lima has jaw-dropping sunsets and seriously good food. But that's not to say that this place
Not the food,
is
but the
or
place.
always has
The
been
place is
cozy.
beautiful.
Corruption is a massive problem in the country, and Lima often experiences deadly clashes between protesters and the police. Now, I won't claim to know too much about this, but it does seem to be a recurring problem here, with more than 50 deaths recorded so far in just 2023 alone. If you've watched my previous case of Natalee Holloway, you'll regretfully know why we're here today. Of course, Lima being the city where Stephany Flores Ramirez was born, raised, and sadly, eventually murdered. Stephany was a star from the moment that her family first saw her. Born to her parents Ricardo Flores and Marielena Ramirez on July the 22nd, 1988, her family was struck by her profoundly sweet temperament. As is quite typical in Latin tradition, her last name is a combination of both of her parents' names. Stephany was blessed enough to have a happy childhood, and even from a very early age, she had a notable drive to succeed and excel in whatever she put her mind to. Born into a rather prosperous household, Stephany's father was a retired race car driver, Now a prominent businessman, he also dipped his toes into politics. Ricardo Flores even ran for vice president of Peru in the year 2001, and then president 5 years later. So we're talking about the daughter of a very powerful man here. In a country with extreme wealth disparity, Stephany and her 4 brothers enjoyed the benefits of living on the upper end of this scale, and had access to some of the best education in the country. Soaring through school with top marks, many students looked up to her. She was popular yet down to earth all the same, and many of her teachers saw her as charming and very intelligent. And so, with no shortage of friends and a very successful family, Stephany lived a happy and relatively carefree life. And in the year 2008, and at the age of 20, she decided to study business administration at the University of San Martin de Porres.
Hey, at least she knew what she wanted, bro. Respect. Massive respect for that.
By 2010, and now in her 3rd year of school, Stephany was looking forward to the future. Not only did she have a fruitful life ahead of her, but she was also ready to begin working for herself. Fortunately enough, she was already gaining work experience through her family's business. The customers there described her as polite, respectful, loving, and a pleasure to be around. But despite having an outwardly innocent appearance, in reality, Stephany knew how to party when she felt like it. With money from her father and access to some of the best nightlife spots in Peru, Stephany was no
You know what they say, you work hard, you play harder, bruh.
stranger to the plethora of clubs and casinos that were available to the upper class spenders. And it was at one of those casinos, named Atlantic City, when, on the night of May the 30th, 2010, Stephany ran into an all too familiar man named Joran Van Der Sloot. It was around 3 AM when Stephany sat down at a poker table beside him that the two caught each other's eye. And despite both of them being from different countries, both could easily converse in English, and apparently immediately hit it off. Stephany was attracted to his swagger, confidence, and laid-back but self-assured demeanor. And as for Joran, well, he saw a beautiful local girl with a fantastic smile and a hand for gambling. The two started chatting at the table, and after asking Joran why he was here in Lima, he told her that he was on holiday to get away from some rather stressful events back home. But unknown to her at the time, these so-called stressful events were actually centered around the murder of Natalee Holloway and the resulting fallout. Instead, Stephany was told that he was actually the son of a very wealthy lawyer and judge in training named Paul Van Der Sloot. And perhaps feeling safe that this guy was from a comfortable background, much like herself, she ultimately let her guard down, and the two talked late into the night. You see, Stephany was an avid poker player, and I guess the two found it quite attractive that both of them shared the same interest. But Stephany was not just an enthusiast, not at all. In fact, she knew how to play the odds and win. And just a few days prior, on March the 25th, she'd even won $10,000 at the local baccarat table. As the hours passed, many drinks were consumed between the two. And although initial conversations were innocent enough, things eventually became flirty. And of course, that is when Joran asked Stephany if she wanted to spend the night with him. Stephany agreed, and so the couple returned to his hotel room, number 309 at the Hotel TAC, which can be found in the Miraflores district of Lima. There are conflicting reports on whether the two did have sex or not. Of course, Joran claims they did, though other reports indicate that she returned with him so the two could play more poker online. Like I said, the events are quite hazy, but what we do know for sure is that after returning to Joran's hotel room,
all we know for sure is she walked through that fucking door.
Stephany, at some point through the early morning, had gotten a hold of his laptop. Whether she was using the laptop to play poker online, or if she was intentionally snooping around, is still actually not known. It is certain, however, that at some point through the early morning, she made the all too terrifying realization that he was connected to the disappearance of Natalee Holloway. The horror Stephany must have felt in that moment must have been enormous. This man had conned her into his room, and now she was in unfamiliar territory with a potentially dangerous murderer. And tragically, things would only get much, much worse from here. When Joran realized what she was doing on his laptop, his heart filled with rage. A physical fight broke out between the two, and sadly, he was much taller and heavier than she was. Smashing her in the nose with his elbow, Stephany's head then hit the wall. As a result, she began to bleed profusely, and that is when Joran got on top and began to strangle her. Throwing her onto the floor afterwards, he noticed that she was still alive. And so, taking his bloodied shirt off of him, he covered her mouth and nose and held on until she passed away. As the sun rose over the Flores Ramirez residence, Stephany was still nowhere to be found. Turns out, she never made it home the night prior, and her father, Ricardo, grew increasingly worried by this. It wasn't like her to stay out all night, and as time passed by, he felt a sickening feeling in his gut. Ricardo knew that something was wrong. In a state of panic, he called Stephany's brother, Enrique. He told his son that Stephany was missing, that she was supposed to be home by now, and that he just knew that something terrible must have happened.
As a parent, I understand sometimes you just get that feeling. Fuck.
Happened to her. And so Enrique and Ricardo began to call and message around to friends, family, and colleagues of Stephany. And after coming back empty-handed, they decided to notify the police and file a missing persons report. Ricardo knew that his daughter was out gambling the night prior, and so it didn't take long for the Peruvian authorities to arrive at the Atlantic City casino. And after obtaining the security footage of the previous evening, and after close examination, they finally spotted Stephany and some unknown individual. Through these surveillance cameras, they managed to trace her as she walked around gambling and drinking through the night, right up to the moment when she met the tall man and sat down right beside him. Thankfully, it wouldn't take long for investigators to identify this man and obtain his national identification number. Obvious to say here, but as the last confirmed person to have seen her, Joran Van Der Sloot was their #1 suspect. Investigators noticed that the pair left the casino together at around 5 AM that morning, and although where they went afterwards was not initially clear, a surveillance camera caught the two returning to Joran's hotel in the Miraflores district of Peru. You can see here that a camera captured Stephany and Joran entering the room together. A couple hours later, Joran left the room to return with 2 cups of coffee and a loaf of bread. And 3 hours after the two entered the room together, Joran left for a second time alone. As he left, he told the hotel staff that Stephany was still inside, but not to disturb her as she was getting some sleep. It was only on June the 2nd, which was 3 days after her death and after Joran left the hotel, that Stephany's lifeless body was found in room 309 by hotel employees. It was immediately apparent that she had been badly beaten. With a broken neck, she had also suffered blunt force trauma to the back of the head. Investigators found a tennis racket in the room, and sadly, it is believed to be involved in her death. Upon inspecting the hotel's registry system, investigators learned that room 309 was registered in Joran Van Der Sloot's name, and just as expected, he matched the figure seen in the surveillance footage analyzed in the days prior. Leaving the hotel, Joran walked out without returning the room's keycard, and in the process, he had left the television on loud to make it sound like someone was inside. As already mentioned earlier, he also told the hotel staff that Stephany was inside and sleeping, and that, furthermore, she should not be disturbed. So, investigators knew that he was very likely to be the man behind Stephany's death. But where exactly did Joran go after fleeing the hotel? And that was very much the problem, because Joran was nowhere to be found. And with a 72-hour head start, he could quite literally be anywhere by now. The authorities released both his name and his face to the public in a desperate bid to find him. But before we carry on this story today, who precisely is Joran Van Der Sloot? So, we've already covered his actions between Natalee's and, sadly now, Stephany's deaths. But who was Joran Van Der Sloot as a child? And were there any warning signs before he became a murderer? Born on August the 6th, 1987, Joran Andrea Petrus Van Der Sloot lived a life filled with comfort and wealth. With financial support from his father, he had a well-padded childhood in the city of Arnhem, with his 2 brothers and mother, Anita, who taught art at school. In the year 1990, his family moved from Arnhem to the island of Aruba in the Caribbean. Soon after this, he enrolled into his local international school, where he actually excelled in his studies. Being tall, charming, and athletic, Joran played football and tennis, and would go on to become an honor student. Tennis was his sport of choice, and he would often train with his father in the evenings. Tennis is actually something that keeps reappearing in this terrible story. As you already know, a racket was found in his hotel room. And
Oh my God. He went Wimbledon on her? That's fucking... So this little shit was born basically silver spoon in mouth, and a pretty decent life, it sounds like. I mean, I won't go as far as saying yes, definitely a silver spoon in mouth, but at least, you know, a spork of sorts. Like, he sounded on the other end of hardships, you know what I mean? Anybody who can play tennis, they got a good life. I've never played tennis.
This wouldn't be the final
I take that back. Yeah, I have. Played it with my grandma like 2 times. Did not see the point in it. I got so tired.
appearance either. Despite doing well in school, Anita had repeatedly stated that her son was a spoiled brat and a habitual liar. Where his 2 brothers were more level-headed throughout their childhoods, Joran was turbulent, stroppy, and pompous. He was known for sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night and partying at casinos right across the island. So you can already get a sense of what type of person he was growing up to become. With everything in the world offered to him and no one willing to discipline him, he was the type of person to believe that the world revolved around his existence. Joran would do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted, and no one ever bothered to check in on him or his terrible actions because he was performing so well in school and sports. Yes, that was the life of Joran Van Der Sloot, a wealthy foreign boy known to always get his way. And as he got older, this arrogance grew alongside his rather expensive tastes. It was on the island of Aruba in the year 2005 that he met an American girl named Natalee Holloway, and after taking her to the beach once the bars in the local area had closed, he tried to tempt her into sex. But when she refused his advancements, he refused to let go. Instead, he kicked her in the head, which then sent her sprawling. Knocked unconscious by the assault, she couldn't fight back for what was about to happen next. In an act of sheer barbaric brutality,
Oh my God, let's just kill this fucker. Be done with it. I want him, I want to shoot him in his face.
Joran then grabbed a concrete cinder block beside him and brought it down on her head. And with her now well and truly killed, he then let her body drift away in the ocean. The consequential missing persons case and media frenzy surrounding Natalee and Joran reached international attention and spanned for well over a decade. Joran was the primary suspect from the very beginning, but due to several legal reasons, he was unable to be convicted for the crime, despite multiple investigations, detainments, and even interrogations. So, why was Joran in Lima in the year 2010? Well, it was actually because he had extra money to burn from a source that you may not expect. Just a few days prior to meeting Stephany, Joran had extorted Natalee Holloway's family, promising to divulge the location of their daughter's body if they paid him $250,000. After receiving just a small portion of the money from her family, he then fled to Lima to spend the cash on a gambling-fueled escapade. It was there, at the Atlantic City Casino, that he met Stephany Flores Ramirez. And this would eventually lead to her murder on the 5th anniversary of Natalee's murder. Back to the present day in our case, Joran was still nowhere to be found.
This is so fucked up and shitty all at the same time. I want him to get shot in his face. I'm not even gonna lie about it.
And at this point in time was considered to be the lone suspect in this murder. As a result, an Interpol police notice was issued, and all surrounding countries were told to keep their eyes open for the young Dutchman. Miraculously, it did not actually take someone long to spot Joran. In fact, he was seen entering the neighbouring country of Chile via the Chacaluta border crossing. And although he did get away, everyone knew that he was now inside that country. And on June the 3rd, which was 4 days after murdering Stephany, he was seen entering a taxi in the coastal city of Vina del Mar. On his way to Santiago, the Chilean police managed to catch up with him. This is where he was then promptly arrested, with Stephany's bloody clothes still in his possession. Joran initially denied any involvement.
Are you fucking serious?
With Stephany's murder. He invented a wild story about armed robbers who were waiting for him in his hotel room. Allegedly, they then killed Stephany once she refused to be quiet. I mean, this all sounds like a story made up by a child. But then again, with Joran, I'm not that surprised. On June the 5th, and once deported back to Peru, Joran's interrogation officially began. And after 2 days of being interrogated and realizing that he had no room to wriggle his way out of this one, Joran would finally confess to Stephany's murder. In a written statement, Joran detailed the events of when the murder took place. He recounted leaving the hotel to buy coffee and bread, but upon his return, he noticed Stephany using his laptop. She had seen a message pop up on his desktop which linked him to the case of Natalee Holloway. He then claimed that, when he tried to explain his involvement, Stephany suddenly struck him. An altercation began. She then tried to escape, but Joran was much bigger and stronger than she was. According to his written confession, Joran said, "I did not want to do it. The girl intruded into my private life. She didn't have any right. I went to her and I hit her. She was scared, we argued, and then she tried to escape. I grabbed her by the neck and hit her. After the murder, he took her money, downed an espresso shot with an amphetamine pill, packed up and fled the hotel." Toxicology reports later indicate that, for whatever reason, he was lying about the amphetamines, as none were found to be present in his system. This, in actuality, was most likely a calculated ruse by Joran, a tactic used to lessen his sentence. Interesting fact, but in Peru, felonies committed under the influence of drugs can gain leniency in the courtroom. And Joran's attorney likely knew this, and factored it into their legal strategy. On June the 11th, 2010, the judge ordered Joran Van Der Sloot to be held on charges of robbery and first-degree murder. And after stating that he had acted with both ferocity and great cruelty, and also knowing how much money his family had behind him, the judge did not allow him to have the chance of bail. Moving into his trial, Joran was not to be tried by a jury, but by a panel of 3 judges instead. Once the trial began, a simple majority would be needed for his conviction. On the morning that his trial began, an angry mob watched in satisfaction as he was ushered inside. Some would even go as far to throw rotten fruit and eggs at him. Joran was taken to a maximum security prison afterwards. He was under 24-hour surveillance in a maximum security unit. Fearing for his life in the infamously cutthroat and brutal South American prison system, it is reported that Joran offered to disclose the actual location of Natalee's body in exchange for transfer to an Aruban prison, but his offer, rightfully so, was ignored.
Good.
Now, it's kind of obvious that Joran is not the
Because, I mean, it'd probably just be more bullshit.
most intelligent man in the room. But traveling to Peru and then murdering a very powerful man's daughter, yeah, that was definitely one of his worst decisions. Murderers and abusers often have a much larger target on their back when in prison. And now, in such a corrupt system, it is kind of understandable why Joran was so bloody terrified. And so, he waited behind bars with fear while his defense team did everything they could to help build a case to support him. Between the years of 2010 and 2012, his leading attorney, Maximo Navarro, did everything in his power to intimidate the prosecution and delay court proceedings. He was even quoted as saying that his legal strategy was to paralyze the process and make everything as difficult as possible. So was his name Maximo Navarro, or Maximo Pain in the Ass? First, he criticized Joran's public defender who represented him during his interrogation, charging her with abuse of authority, conspiracy to commit a crime, and misrepresentation. He then attacked the translator who helped Joran translate Spanish to Dutch, and then questioned his credentials as a court-appointed translator. Navarro also claimed that his client was being unlawfully held before conviction, and although he knew that the Peruvian government allows for up to 18 months of detainment for interrogation, he continued to fight back anyway, doing anything in his power to slow the process to a grinding halt. In February of 2010, Navarro attempted to file a violent emotion defense with the court, claiming that his client Joran was not consciously in control of his actions during the attack. Now, if the judge would have accepted this, then Joran's sentence could have been reduced to a mere 3 to 5 years, therefore meaning that his parole would be as early as 20 months
hell no,
after.
bro.
But despite Navarro's desperate attempts, his efforts were thankfully ultimately in vain. By the time that 2012 rolled around, Joran and his defense team knew that there was no way he was getting away with this murder. And so, on January the 11th, 2012, Joran Van Der Sloot pleaded guilty to the murder and robbery of Stephany Flores Ramirez. He was therefore sentenced to 28 years behind bars, and further ordered to pay $75,000 to the Flores family. And so, With this punishment put in place, so ends the legal story of Stephany's untimely murder. But this is not where our story ends, because, as some of you will know, Joran was recently extradited to the United States to face charges related to the extortion of Natalee's parents. Fearing for a sentence that would surpass his lifespan, he then agreed to take a plea deal instead. It was in this moment in court, and while under oath, that he gave the whole story of what happened to Natalee Holloway. He then further pleaded guilty to his charges of extortion and wire fraud, giving him 20 years behind bars after his sentence in Peru, in exchange for an exemption of any murder charges brought forward over the death of Natalee Holloway. And, as you will know from my previous case, this is where he did in fact admit that he'd murdered Natalee. So, what happens to Joran Van Der Sloot now? Well, for the next short while, he will remain back in Peru where he must serve the rest of his 28-year sentence, which, by the way, will be completed in June 2038. Once this sentence is finally over, he will then be transferred to the United States to begin the second sentencing for the extortion of Natalee Holloway's family, this running from June 2038 to June 2058. We don't quite know what will happen between now and then, but even in the short time behind bars so far, his father has tragically passed away from a heart attack while playing tennis. In the end, despite facing a very long sentence behind bars, many people believe that Joran Van Der Sloot got off relatively easy here. I mean, 2 murders and a long list of other despicable crimes for a mere 48 years is honestly insane. His actions were entirely senseless and utterly cruel. Personally, I think this man deserves a lot more punishment.
But I mean, seriously, how many videos have we watched on here where people get like 5 years for killing someone? It's like, what kind of fool ass shit is that?
But hey, spending the next 15 years in a Peruvian prison, well, who knows how that will go. Finishing this story on those most important, Stephany sadly joins Natalee as a bright and kind young woman who had so much prosperity ahead of her. And just like Natalee, the amount of people who love her is a true testament to how beautiful her personality is. It's a terrible shame that she too was taken all too early. And despite being from very different regions of the world, they tragically shared the same fate, made by the same hands of a cold-hearted killer. To make things more frustrating, it wasn't that the authorities didn't care. They tried to do everything in their power to try and convict him earlier. It's just that there was never enough evidence to keep him permanently behind bars. Many people had the sneaky feeling that he'd killed Natalee as well. And so, for that to carry on for several years, and then him to go out of the country and murder someone else, honestly, that is just tragic. And as always, I'd like to know what you think about.
Like, if he wouldn't have done that, he probably would have got away with everything. Like, if he would just kept his fucking mouth shut and all the other shit, which I'm glad he didn't. Don't get me wrong. I'm very glad he didn't. You know, at least some justices are being served against this piece of shit now. Even though it's not what we think it should be, it's better than nothing. But yeah, if he would have just kept his mouth shut and kept his nose clean from there on out, he would have been golden, bro. That's sad.
About this case, Joran Van Der Sloot was only given 48 years for essentially 2
and that's even sadder.
Murders. And furthermore, he's exempt from being charged against Natalee's death. To begin with, do you think 48 years is enough? And to add to that, do you think he should have been given that plea deal? This is also the first time that Coffeehouse Crime has ever done a 2-parter before. So, what are your thoughts on that? Anyway, folks, I think I'm going to wrap this one up here today.
Alright, I really enjoyed that. I really did. If y'all enjoyed it as much as I did, please go down there and hit that thumbs up. Yeah, let me know you love me. While you're down there going over, hit the subscribe button. Become part of the Bill 5000 Nation. We do some crazy shit here, bruh. If you want to know when that crazy shit happens, ding that bell. It might work for you, might not. But if it does, I'll know because you'll be there on my premieres. You'll be speaking with me in the live chats. And I'll be like, what up, fool? And if you really want to support the channel, links in the description. Go down there. Visit my store. Got some amazing merch. Some of the best out there. And if you don't believe me, go there. Check it out for yourself. You can tell me after you're done. And if you do go to the store and you end up getting anything, please most definitely send me pictures, anything else. Hit me up on my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, any of that. I would love to have it. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Nah, honestly, he deserves like life plus like 20 years in my opinion. And every day of it needs to be like met with like 3 different peens in his butt.